The Sega Saturn was originally announced for launch on Saturday the 2nd of September 1995, dubbed Saturn Day, which Sony responded to by announcing the PlayStation's launch would be 1 week later. However, at E3 that year, it was announced that Saturn Day was a ruse and that the console was being launched immediately on the 11th of May. Sega did this to gain a 4-month lead. However, this backfired massively. The Saturn was launching for $399, so Sony retaliated with a $299 launch price to combat the earlier release. Also, most third-party games were set for completion in time for the original launch, so there were very few titles available, especially since many of the successful Japanese titles were not imported. Many third-party developers viewed this as a way for Sega to take most of the initial software sales for themselves at the expense of the third parties. Also, the Saturn was only released in a few retailers, and those who were left out, such as KB Toys and Wal-mart, felt betrayed and refused to stock anything Sega related to make more room for their competition, which carried on all the way through the Dreamcast era. Finally, Sega sold 80,000 units before the PlayStation's release, but the PlayStation sold 100,000 units upon release, and then the Saturn took the role of distant third behind PlayStation and N64. In Europe, the Sega Saturn was released on the 8th of July 1995, which was only 2 months before the PlayStation, which released on the 29th of September. It sold 9.5 million units before its discontinuation in 1998, when Sega started discussing the successor where they were developing, the Dreamcast, just 2 years after the Saturn's release. This was not uncommon for Sega, as can be seen by the Mega CD and 32X. In Japan, there was much outrage by the announcement of a new console, since the Saturn was doing well and was being strongly supported, as well as being quite popular. And this led to companies being more skeptical to support Sega in the future, including the Dreamcast. The Saturn was a powerful machine for its time, but its design, with 2 CPUs and 6 other processors, made harnessing this power extremely difficult, especially since many of the ancillary chips were off-the-shelf components, not specifically designed to work together. Rumors suggest that the original design was for a 2D powerhouse machine, not dissimilar to the Neo Geo, which called for a single central processor, but upon hearing of the PlayStation's capabilities, a second processor was added late in development to increase potential performance and add 3D capabilities. Third-party development was initially hindered by the lack of useful software libraries and development tools. Developers were also hindered by the fact that the Saturn rendered quadrilaterals instead of triangles, which were the industry norm. This made things such as triangular rocks in Tomb Raider look worse than the PlayStation version, although showed less texture distortion as seen in cross-platform titles such as Destruction Derby and Wipeout. The quadrilateral focus also improved video memory and gave the Saturn an advantage for 2D games, attracting RPGs, arcade ports, and 2D fighters. Due to the complexity of the system, some programmers cut development costs and time by only utilizing one CPU, such as with Alien Trilogy. While having 2 separate CPUs could offer benefits to some games such as Virtua Fighter, which utilized 1 CPU per fighter, the problem was that both CPUs shared other components, leading to trouble accessing things like RAM. Compared to the PlayStation, the Saturn's hardware was difficult to work with because of its more complex graphics hardware and lesser overall performance, as noted by Lobotomy Software, which stated that, in order to port Duke Nukem 3D and Exhumed, they had to almost entirely rewrite the build engine to get adequate performance from the Saturn. Also, during testing of an unreleased Quake port for the PlayStation, the Saturn's performance was found to be notably inferior for the game. On the other hand, it is worth mentioning that with later programming techniques from Sega, the Saturn proved to be powerful when displaying 3D environments, and the video of Shenmue on Saturn in the Dreamcast version of Shenmue 2 just showcases how impressive the Saturn could be if utilized. Overall, I would say that the Saturn is a very underrated console that, in its day, deservedly received a lot of hate. But now, due to its low cost and many exclusive titles, it deserves a chance to redeem itself and earn a place in your retro collection.